Something happened at the end of Day 5 of Cleveland Browns training camp that every single person in that building is going to remember. And if you weren't watching, if you missed it, if you scrolled past the highlight without stopping, then you need to sit down right now. Because what went down in that 2-minute drill to close out practice today was not just a training camp moment, it was a statement. It was a declaration. It was one quarterback drawing a line in the sand and daring the other one to cross it. We're going to break every piece of it down, the rep counts, the pre-snap chaos, the walk-off touchdown, and exactly what it all means for the most expensive quarterback controversy in NFL history. But first, we need to talk about how we even got here. Because this story doesn't start on a practice field in Berea. It starts with a $230 million disaster, 2 torn Achilles tendons, and a fan base that literally cheered when their own quarterback got carted off the field. Let's be real about what Deshaun Watson represents, because too many people are dancing around it. When the Cleveland Browns traded for Watson in 2022 and handed him the richest fully guaranteed contract in NFL history at the time, $230 million, not a dollar of it contingent on anything, they made a bet that the entire league questioned. And in 4 years, that bet has produced exactly 19 starts, 19 games out of 68 opportunities. The shoulder surgery in 2023 robbed him of a full season before he ever really got started. Then, in October of 2024, he went down with a torn Achilles against the Bengals, and Browns fans in the stands were heard cheering. Not politely clapping while hoping he'd be okay, cheering loudly. That moment told you everything about how far the relationship between Watson and Cleveland had deteriorated. But what happened next was somehow even worse. During the rehab process, the Achilles tore again, a second rupture. Watson missed the entire 2025 season without throwing a single regular season pass. Now it's 2026. Watson says he's fully healthy. He says this year is night and day from where he was. He's talking about cutting it loose and proving everybody wrong, and silencing the people who said he'd never play again. And credit where it's due, the fact that he's even standing on a practice field in Berea after 2 Achilles ruptures and a shoulder reconstruction is legitimately remarkable. Most players don't come back from one of those, let alone 2. But here's the thing about remarkable comebacks, they still have to show up in the numbers. And the numbers from Week 1 of Browns training camp in 2026 are not telling a comeback story. Watson finished the first week with a 64.4% completion rate, 3 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. 6 in non-contact training camp practices against his own defense. That's not rust, that's a flashing red warning sign. And the man standing right next to him on that depth chart noticed every single one of them. When the 2025 NFL Draft happened and Shedeur Sanders kept sliding, round 1, round 2, round 3, round 4, all the way down to the 5th round, it became one of the most talked about moments in recent draft history. The son of Deshaun Sanders, one of the most decorated college quarterbacks of his generation, falling to pick 144. Theories flew everywhere. Was it his dad's reputation causing friction with front offices? Was it the combine? Was it the sack numbers from Colorado? Whatever the reason, Cleveland scooped him up in the 5th round, and immediately the narrative was set. Practice squad project, developmental backup, roster footnote. Watson was the guy, Shedeur was the background character. Then Shedeur Sanders started making that narrative impossible to maintain. His rookie year wasn't perfect. 7 starts, 1,400 yards, 7 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Raw numbers that don't jump off the page, but context matters. He was thrown into a broken situation with almost no preparation time, quarterbacking a team that had been defined by dysfunction for years. And even in those rough conditions, you could see something. The footwork under pressure, the ability to read a defense pre-snap, the poise in moments when poise had no business being there. By the time January came around, GM Andrew Berry called him a work in progress, a polite way of saying the potential was real but the product wasn't finished. But then something happened during the offseason that nobody expected. Sanders went to work, not just physically, mentally. He studied this offense the way people study for exams that determine their entire future, because for him, it did. By the time spring practices rolled around, Berry was using completely different language. He called Sanders' growth phenomenal. said it started in January and February and built through every practice into something genuinely impressive. Coaches were going on record praising his ability to decipher a pass rush, his deep ball, his decision-making. And when 2026 training camp opened, Sanders came out and immediately posted a 70% completion rate against Watson's 64.4%, while working with fewer reps and a second-team offense around him. The kid who wasn't supposed to be in this conversation had walked straight to the center of it. Every year, at every training camp across the NFL, there's a specific moment where the vibe shifts. The first day in full pads. It's the day the glorified passing camp ends and actual football begins. Bodies are moving. Offensive linemen are firing out. The defense is flying around with real contact and real intent. And quarterbacks, every single one of them, suddenly have to process all of that faster, cleaner, and more decisively than they did the day before. Day 5 of Browns camp was that day. And from the moment practice started, the entire energy in Berea had a different temperature to it. Watson came out with real energy. You could see it. He was active in the huddle, rallying guys, communicating with intent. The previous days had included multiple independent reports of Watson struggling with consistency and throwing into trouble, and you could tell on his face that he'd registered all of it. He knew he needed a better day. And for long stretches of the team periods, he delivered one. No interceptions on the day. More command in the huddle, more urgency in his decision-making than the early camp days had shown. That needs to be acknowledged because this is not a hit piece on Deshaun Watson. The man is competing. He is not rolling over. He has every reason to fight for this job, and he's doing it. But here's the part of the story that gets quietly buried when people want to paint a prettier picture than reality allows. According to multiple reporters standing on that sideline, head coach Todd Monken was visibly frustrated with the pre-snap situation coming from the first-team unit throughout the practice. Multiple times during team periods, they had to break the huddle, reset, fix alignments, address guys being out of position before the snap even happened. Pre-snap penalties, pre-snap chaos from the first team. The unit built around the veteran quarterback who was supposed to bring experience and command to the entire operation. Think about what that means. Watson's entire argument for winning this job rests on experience, on knowing the offense inside and out, on the claim that his years in the league give him an advantage over a second-year player who only made 7 starts as a rookie. But if the first-team unit under Watson looks sloppy and disorganized at the line of scrimmage before the ball is even snapped, that argument develops a serious crack right down the middle. Pre-snap execution is supposed to be where the veteran wins. That's supposed to be his territory. If he's losing it there, where exactly is the edge? And then there was Jerry Jeudy. Look, nobody is throwing Jeudy under the bus, but the reality is that Watson was throwing balls to a receiver who kept putting them on the ground. Drops have a way of showing up on a quarterback's numbers whether their fault or not. When evaluators are looking at rep counts and efficiency, drops are part of the equation, and Watson's equation kept getting messier. Here's how the final sequence of Day 5 practice went down, and pay attention because every detail of this matters. Watson's offense stepped into the 2-minute drill first. 90 seconds, first-team offense, scripted plays, the best personnel around him that this roster has to offer. This was his moment. This was where the veteran was supposed to assert himself, move the chains, and remind everybody in that building why he's still the guy.
Watson's unit went 4 and out. Nothing. 0 points. The defense won that possession without breaking a sweat. And on the final play of Watson's series, KC Concepcion, the first-round rookie receiver who has been one of the real bright spots of this camp, came down awkwardly after a route and landed hard on his shoulder. The good news, and this matters, is that Concepcion was later reported to be completely fine, not a serious injury, expected to be ready to go without missing time. But in that moment, as Watson walked off the field with nothing to show for his possession and his top rookie receiver on the ground holding his shoulder, it was about as bleak a visual as you can have to end a 2-minute drill. Then Shedeur Sanders walked onto that field. Second-team offense, starting at their own 25-yard line. It was a media-only practice day, so there was no crowd energy, no fans packed into the stands creating noise and electricity, just reporters, cameras, coaches, and teammates standing on the sideline watching. And in that quiet, Sanders went to work. First play of the drive, he went right at Denzel Boston on a deep route, throwing to a spot where Boston's back was turned to the football. Now, casual observers might look at that and call it an underthrow or a lucky flag, but the football-smart people on that sideline understood exactly what they were watching. Sanders had identified a corner in a vulnerable position on a route where his receiver was set up to either catch the ball or draw a foul. He made that calculation in real time, instantly, and executed it. Either Boston comes down with a reception, or it's pass interference, or it's a holding call. Any of those outcomes moves the chains. That's not a quarterback making a mistake. That is a quarterback using the rule book as a weapon. The flag came out, pass interference, first down. Just like that, the drive was alive. From there, according to reporters on the sideline, Sanders connected with Tylan Wallace on a difficult catch down the left sideline. Wallace had to go up and pluck that ball off the back of cornerback D'Angelo Ross. Not the cleanest placement in the world, but Wallace adjusted his body and came down with it. A big gain to set up the ending of the drive. And then came the play, the one that had grown men on that sideline jumping up and down. Sanders dropped a gorgeous fade route down the right sideline to Gage Larvadain. Multiple beat reporters from major Cleveland outlets called it the play of the day on the spot. Brown Zone's Scott Petrak, who has been covering this team for years, named it the play of camp outright. Perfect placement. Larvadain beat cornerback Michael Coates Jr. cleanly. The ball came in at exactly the spot where only Larvadain could reach it. Touchdown. Walk off. Practice over. Sit with that for a second. Watson's unit, first-team offense, veteran quarterback, best personnel available, went 4 and out in the 2-minute drill to close camp. Sanders' unit, second team, fewer reps by design, working against a defense that has its assignments memorized and is competing at full intensity because they don't know how else to play, drove the length of the field and walked it off with a touchdown to end the day in front of every reporter, every coach, and every teammate on that roster. Todd Monken has been saying all camp that the players are going to decide this competition, that he wants to see who can take over a game when the moment demands it. Well, on day 5 of Cleveland Browns training camp, in the highest stakes moment of the entire practice, the players showed him exactly who that is. Every time something like this happens, a certain type of person rushes to the rep count as a shield. Watson got more reps today, therefore the comparison isn't fair, therefore the results don't count, therefore we should wait. Let's address that directly, because it's not the defense people think it is. Watson took 13 of 25 team period reps on day 5. Sanders took 8 of 16. Watson is with the first unit. He's getting the scripted plays, the favorable personnel groupings, the structured situations built around making him successful. Sanders is working with the second unit, facing a defense that has its assignments memorized and is competing at full intensity because they don't know how else to play.
So yes, Watson has more volume, but volume is not the argument. The argument is what each quarterback is doing with his opportunities, and specifically, what each one does when the pressure is highest and the result matters most. In that 2-minute drill, Watson had every structural advantage available to him. The first-team receivers, the first-team line, the play calling built around his strengths, and he produced nothing. Sanders had none of those advantages, and he walked it off. You cannot look at the rep structure and use it to explain away that result. If anything, the structure makes Sanders' performance more impressive, not less. He's producing at a higher rate with less support against equivalent or better competition in the moments that matter. And that's not an accident. That's a pattern. It's been the pattern all camp long. Sanders doesn't need volume to make noise. What he needs is a crack of daylight, and every time Watson leaves one open, Sanders steps through it. Now, Here's the part of the Day 5 story that deserves its own moment, because the quarterback competition isn't the only thing reshaping this franchise's identity right now. Jared Verse sat down with reporters and was asked directly about stepping into Myles Garrett's shadow in Cleveland, and the way he answered it needs to be heard by every single person who has ever written this city off. First, context. The Myles Garrett trade was one of the most seismic moves of the entire 2026 offseason. Cleveland traded away a two-time Defensive Player of the Year, the holder of the single-season sack record, one of the most dominant defensive players the NFL has seen in years, and got back Verse, a 2027 first-round pick, a 2028 second-round pick, and a conditional 2029 third. The reaction was split. Half the league thought Cleveland panicked. The other half thought they got a generational return for an aging asset. The truth is still being written. But Verse showed up in Berea and immediately made it clear that he didn't come here to be a consolation prize. He told reporters flat out, he's not here for individual sacks, he's not here for tackles for loss or Pro Bowl selections or all-pro nods. All of that is nice, but it's not why he made the trip from Los Angeles to Cleveland. He said he's here to change the standard of what defense looks like in this city. And then he dropped the line that stopped people in their tracks. He said he keeps hearing people call this a rebuild, and he wants to make something clear. This is not a rebuild. He's not in Cleveland to sit back for 6 months and enjoy the Lake Erie sunsets. He's here to win, right now. And the organization is right behind him on that. Think about where that statement lands in the context of this franchise's history. Cleveland has been the punchline of NFL irrelevance conversations for the better part of 2 decades. The 2017 team went 0-16. The losing culture has been so deeply embedded in this city's identity that fans cheered an injury to their own starting quarterback less than 2 years ago. And here comes a man who just won a Super Bowl ring with the Rams, who was named Defensive Rookie of the Year, who was ranked number 35 on the NFL Top 100 by the peers he lines up against every single week, and he walks into Berea on day 5 of training camp and says out loud, on the record without flinching, this is not a rebuild. We're here to win. His peers around the league already know what he brings. Max Crosby and Von Miller both told him this offseason that his power is the best in the entire NFL. He's been at the Von Miller Pass Rush Summit absorbing knowledge from the best edge rushers alive. He's pushing for extra reps in practice when he loses individual matchups, rather than walking off satisfied. He stayed after one session specifically to coach rookie offensive tackle Spencer Fano, the guy he'd just beaten, through his technique, walking him through the footwork, running half-speed drills, explaining how to use leverage against speed rushers. That's not a guy who came here to collect a paycheck and leave. Todd Monken said it perfectly when Verse first arrived. He's going to fit us like a glove. Just be yourself. There's only one of you. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough in the middle of the Watson versus Sanders debate. The quarterback decision doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens inside the context of what this entire roster is built to do. And right now, what this defense is built to do changes the entire equation.
On day 5, the defensive line was a monster. Verse, Mason Graham, Tyson Campbell, these guys were winning individual matchups throughout team periods, generating pressure, making life difficult for both quarterbacks simultaneously. Multiple reporters and observers agreed it was the defensive line's best day of camp so far. A defense that can genuinely win games 14-10 doesn't need a hero quarterback. It doesn't need someone airing it out 50 times a game trying to outscore opponents through the air. What it needs is a quarterback who is smart, efficient, and capable of making 1 or 2 big plays in close games when the situation demands it. A quarterback who can read a defense in real time, avoid the killer mistake, and take the shot when it's there. Look at what Sanders showed in that 2-minute drill. He identified a coverage vulnerability on the first play and turned it into a first down without completing a pass. He trusted his receiver on a contested catch down the sideline and let him make a play, and then he dropped a precise fade route into the one spot on the field where only his guy could get it. That's exactly the quarterback profile this defense is asking for. Not a gunslinger, a processor. Someone who slows the game down mentally even when it's speeding up physically. The ownership messaging aligns with everything Verse is saying on the field. Jimmy Haslam and managing partner J.W. Johnson have both been clear. The goal is to compete and win, not develop and hope for 2 or 3 years. That message goes from the top floor of the building all the way down to Verse's locker. And that message puts enormous pressure on the coaching staff to make the right quarterback call, and to make it soon. You cannot have your defensive end preaching championship culture while your offensive situation is still sitting unresolved, splitting reps between 2 quarterbacks who might be pulling the offense in completely different directions. At some point, the entire roster deserves clarity. The receivers deserve to know who they're building chemistry with. The offensive line deserves to know whose timing they're syncing to. The defense deserves to know the offensive side of the ball is capable of holding up its end of a close game. The longer this drags into the preseason without a clear answer, the more it undercuts the very message Verse is delivering every single day. Before we close out Day 5, a few things worth tracking on the broader camp picture. Linebacker Carson Schwesinger missed his 2nd consecutive practice with a minor injury. Nothing alarming based on what's been reported, but in the week leading up to the first preseason game, every player missing time is a name on a list that needs monitoring. Cornerback Miles Bryant left practice early with the training staff. Offensive lineman Tevin Jenkins remains out, with KT Leon stepping into his spot. None of these are expected to be long-term concerns, but it's a reminder that this is the period of camp where depth gets stress-tested before the games even start. On the positive side of the injury update picture, Casey Concepcion, who went down on the final play of Watson's 2-minute drill series, was later confirmed to be completely fine. The shoulder was not a serious issue. He's expected to be ready to roll. For a team that has invested a first-round pick in a receiver with his kind of upside, that news cannot be overstated in terms of importance to both the offense and whoever ends up behind center for Week 1. Here's the honest summary of where things stand after Day 5 of Cleveland Browns Training Camp 2026. Deshaun Watson is fighting. He came out with energy, showed more command in the huddle than the early practices, avoided turnovers for most of the day, and demonstrated that he has not given up on this competition. But the pre-snap chaos attached to his unit continues to undercut his veteran argument. The drops keep muddying his efficiency numbers. And in the 2-minute drill, the highest pressure moment of the entire practice, the moment Todd Monken himself has said matters most, Deshaun Watson's first-team offense went 4 and out and walked off with nothing. Shedeur Sanders, working with the second unit on fewer reps with less structural support and against a defense that competes at the same intensity regardless of who's under center, drove the field and closed out Day 5 with a walk-off touchdown that had reporters reaching for superlatives. Scott Petrak called the final throw the play of camp. Multiple beat writers from Cleveland outlets were unanimous. It wasn't just a highlight, it was a data point, a documented, time-stamped, in front of everybody data point that goes directly into Todd Monken's evaluation file. And surrounding all of it, Jared Verse is busy dismantling the idea that Cleveland is still in rebuild mode. 1 rep at a time, 1 press conference at a time, 1 coaching session with a rookie offensive tackle at a time. He's not performing for the cameras. He's not saying the right things for the press releases. He's doing it with his behavior every single day in Berea, and the rest of the roster is watching. Todd Monken said the players would decide this competition with their play. On Day 5, in the most visible, most pressure-packed moment of training camp so far, the players did exactly that. The only question left is whether Cleveland's front office has the guts to follow what their own eyes are telling them. Because in that 2-minute drill, with the whole team watching and nothing left to prove but everything on the line, 1 quarterback produced a walk-off touchdown. And it wasn't the $230 million one.